Greetings, hockey fans. Today we're going to take a look at how the penalties work in Inside the Crease Hockey. Now, where the penalties come into play is on the action deck, and it's going to be in this section right here, which is where you'll typically find defensive checks. So occasionally there'll be a reading that calls for a penalty check, and you're going to be checking on the opponent. So in this case, you're checking the opponent right wing if his penalty rating is greater than or equal to 5. So where you find the penalty rating on the player cards is right here. Now for the time being, you can ignore the number in parentheses. We'll get to that later. So if we were looking for a penalty rating of 5 or better, this would not qualify. And Brent Hughes is only a 3. Marcel Dion is only a 1. So if the player does not qualify, then it's just a face-off and you continue play. Now looking down here on the Flyers, this is the Broad Street Bullies of 73-74. We see Dave Schultz has a penalty of 11, so he would get a possible penalty. And here's Don Selesky with a penalty rating of 6. Now you still have to do a second check to see if there's a penalty, because there's a chance that it could not be. So what you do then, you flip the next action card, and now you're going to look here under the penalty number, which in this case is 7. And on the right side of the card, the top reading tells you what type of penalty is if it's a minor, in this case hooking, and the bottom one tells you what kind of penalty if it's a major, and most of them are going to be fighting, but there'll be a few for boarding and slashing, which will be a 5-minute power play. Now where the number here comes into play, this is going to be a 1 to 38 number. Now the players will have numbers 1 to 38 distributed among major, minor, and misconduct. But they will not always have all 38 numbers. Now in the case of Marcel Dion, only had 10 penalty minutes on the season. His numbers only go up to 16. Someone like Dave Schultz, his penalties have all 38 numbers. So what you're looking at is, in this case, there is nothing, in the case of Dion, there's nothing next to major. So he cannot get a major penalty. The minor has 16, so you're starting from 1, so you read this as, if the number is from 1 to 16, he gets a minor penalty. Now, there's nothing next to misconduct, so anything from 17 all the way up to 38 on the action card reading will be no penalty, and again, you conduct a face-off, and you stop playing, conduct a face-off. So in the case of a penalty 7, so if Brent Hughes had the penalty, a major is 1 to 6, minor is 7 to 36, so Brent Hughes would get a minor. In the case of Orest Kendrachuk, if the 7 came up for him, his major is 1 to 8. So the 7 falls in the major range, he would get a major penalty. And in the case of Dave Schultz, his major is 1 to 10, so he would get a major. So how you read his is, a major is from 1 to 10, a minor is 11 to 32, and a misconduct is 33 to 38. And it is possible to get a misconduct penalty by itself with no other penalties, which did happen occasionally during that season. If you track through the game summaries, you'll see players got just a misconduct by itself without being attached to a minor or a major. So we got that 7 reading, and we saw how that looks on a couple of different players. And now we'll get into where the parentheses number comes into play. So the parentheses number, when it's next to the penalty rating, that is a fight rating for an opponent. Now let's say Schultz got a major penalty for fighting. You have to determine the opponent on the other team. And where you're going to find that is, again, you're going to flip an action card and you're going to look in the assist section. You'll find a player position and a number in parentheses. So if Schultz is the initial fighter, you're going to look at the right wing on the other team and you're going to look at the number of parentheses next to penalty, not next to major, the number in parentheses next to penalty. So in the action card we looked at, it was calling for the right wing and if he's a 1 or better. So in this case, Bill Collins is a 2, so he would be Schultz's fighting opponent. If the right wing happened to be Marcel Dion, he has no number in parentheses, so he would not be the fighting opponent. And if the initial player that it's calling for on the action card does not qualify as the fighting opponent, then you look at the next highest opponent on the ice. So for the Red Wings that year, we see that Collins is a 2, Hughes is an 8, Dion, as we said, does not have the rating, Larry Johnston is a 5, and Nick Libet is a 4. So out of those 4 remaining players, Brent Hughes is the highest with an 8, so he would be Schultz's fighting opponent. Now, you'll notice that the other penalties will also have a parentheses. So when you see one next to major, minor, or misconduct, that is a misconduct rating in addition to the first penalty that they got. So in the case of Larry Johnston, if he got a major, because he has a number in parentheses, you're also checking to see if he got a minor. And where that's going to come into play is you're going to flip an action card, and this time you're going to look at the pass number, which is going to be a 1 to 40 number on the right-hand side of the action card. So in the case of a 20, it does not fall into his 1 to 13 category, so he would not get a major, a misconduct tacked on to his major. If it was between 1 to 13 on the action card up here in the pass to section, then he would get an additional misconduct. Now you see there's no number in parentheses next to minor, so there's no misconduct check if he gets a minor penalty. Now if he had gotten a misconduct, you notice there's a number in parentheses. The number in parentheses next to misconduct is for a match penalty, which is 10 minutes, the player gets ejected from the game, and there's a 5-minute power play. So if he had gotten a misconduct, now, if he had gotten a misconduct from 30 to 32 on the initial penalty, then you would check for an additional match penalty. If he had gotten a misconduct after a major, you're also checking for a match penalty because he has it next to his misconduct rating. So in a sequence like that, Larry Johnson could get a major, a misconduct, and a match penalty ejected from the game. He can get 25 minutes on one play sequence. Now you see Dave Schultz has numbers in parentheses next to everything. 1 to 10, he could get a misconduct tacked onto a major. 1 to 2, he could get a misconduct tacked onto a minor. And again, 1 to 3, he could get a match penalty tacked on to a misconduct. It can either be the misconduct, the initial reading from 33 to 38, or it could be the misconduct that he got as a result of a major. So you can see this game is very good at precisely tracking down the type of penalties that they got during the course of a season. Now over here on Bill Flett, you see he has 2 stars in parentheses next to the major. That means it's an automatic misconduct. You don't have to draw a 1 to 40 number. Now, Flett is not going to get many majors to begin with. You see, if he was called on to be the fighting opponent, he would have to be a 1, and it would have to be his position, or he's a right wing 1. In that case, he's a 1, he would qualify as the fighting opponent. Now, if it was anything higher than a 1, he wouldn't be involved in a fighting major. And off the initial penalty reading, the penalty number here, the 1 to 38 number, would have to be a 1 for him to get a major. And if that did come up, automatically tack on a misconduct. But he cannot get a misconduct from the 1 to 38 number. His numbers only go up to 28. 29 to 38 is no penalty. and he cannot get a misconduct after a minor. Now some of the other readings that you might see on here, there's a low reading of a 2. Penalty, now you're looking at 4. We've already read the penalty rating from here. So once you have the player, if he's a penalty 4 and it's in his major category, he gets an additional minor. So on Schultz, 4 on him falls into his major category of 1 to 10. So in this case, he would get 7 minutes. He'd get the major and he'd get an additional minor. And you would also check for a misconduct. And if they didn't come up there, you would also check for a misconduct on a minor. Now, if the 4 came up for Larry Johnston, his major is only 1 to 3. So the 4 would fall into his minor category, so it would not be 7 minutes. Now here you're checking 8, and the opponent gets a penalty if he's rated 4 or higher. So in this case, Schultz gets a major because the 8 falls between 1 to 10, and you're checking his opponent. Now let's say the opponent would be the player on the opposing team who originally had the puck. So let's say it was Larry Johnston. You're checking the penalty rating up here, not the 1 to 38 number. So he's a 4, which is what the action card called for. So Johnston would also get a penalty, and you're also going to draw another card and check the 1 to 38 number here to see what kind of penalty it's going to be. No, I'm sorry. Correct that. You're checking the 1 to 38 number here to see what kind of penalty he's going to get. In that case, it was an 11, so he would get a minor. So it's possible for one player to get a major and one player to get a minor. Now, if it came up that it was a fighting major, it's possible for a different player to be Schultz's fighting opponent and Johnston to also get a minor. So that sometimes you get, especially like in the 70s, you get a sequence where 2 players start pushing. One player is going to get a minor just for roughing, and then another player jumps in, like Brent Hughes, and he starts a fight with Schultz. Those 2 end up getting fighting majors, and Johnston just gets a minor for some initial shoving or roughing or whatever. So you can really get some precise penalties in this game. Now, it's even possible for the goalies to get a penalty too. You'll see some goalies may not have it, but Bernie Perron has a penalty rating of 1. He'll get a minor if it's a 2, and he'll get a misconduct with a 3 with an automatic match penalty and ejection from the game for Bernie Perron. Now, some of the card sets were done before they came up with this current penalty system. Now, you can still play the older card sets with the current penalty system. There's not all that much difference. The difference is that it doesn't have the additional numbers in parentheses to tack on misconducts and match penalties. But it still works the same way. Now, in the case of Stan Mikita, if the reading up here was penalty if center 1, so Mikita's a 1, so he's going to get a penalty. And again, you're checking the 1 to 38 number. His numbers only go up to 12. So if it's from 13 to 38, no penalty. If it's 1 to 6, it's a major. If it's a minor, it's 7 to 12. So if you wanted to play these older card sets with the newer penalty ratings, the older card sets have been calculated for the new penalty ratings. You can find that information on Inside Sports website. So any older card set can still be played with the newer penalty ratings. So I think that about sums it up for figuring penalties in Inside the Crease Hockey. Thanks for watching. Catch you on the next one.